All right. Okay. 24 January. Hello. Dis and dat information on the autonomouscollective.net. Yes, I'm trying to include in my continuing fiddling around with Mark's stuff more contemporary things. And in particular, there's a Marx literature that engages AI capitalism. And I wanted to include some of that to keep you interested, hopefully, on the hook to still consider Marxism or neo-Marxism or something or other. And there probably is a post-Marxism. We're not quite there yet, I would assert. But anyway, so there's a article by Nathan J. Robinson on the problem with AI is the problem with capitalism, and then a Nick Dyer Whitford thing on the rise of AI capitalism. It's an interview that originally was in the Los Angeles Review of Books, and I don't think we'll get to the last thing, but if we do, I'll mention that as well. But if you go to the Discord, those people in chat in our chat have the link, Rodiwar Discord, and you'll also get a link to stuff under the subheading of Marxism. The problem with AI is the problem with capitalism. We shouldn't have to fear AI. Frankly, I'd love it if a machine could edit magazine articles for me and I could sit on the beach, but I'm afraid of it because I make a living editing magazine articles and need to keep a roof over my head. If someone could make and sell an equally good rival magazine for close to free, I wouldn't be able to support myself through what I do. The same is true of everyone who works for a living in the present economic system. They have to be terrified by automation because the value of labor matters a lot, and huge fluctuations in its value put all of one's hopes and dreams in peril. Most of the other problems AI could cause really boil down to problems of the way power and wealth are apportioned in our existing society. Because the world is organized into militarized nation states, we have to worry that AI technology will be used in terrifying new superweapons. Because we let scams and fraud flourish in our Wild West economy, we will see a lot of people getting rich using AI to prey on hapless consumers. The profit motive is already socially destructive, but AI will make it much worse because it will allow companies to figure out how to more efficiently trick and exploit people. The new technologies are being developed by private corporations that have no incentive to ensure that a benefit to them is a benefit to all. We need to be clear on the source of problems with AI. They are real and will accelerate the crisis that socialists are devoted to helping humanity solve. But the problem is not technology itself. Technology should be a tool for liberation. Unless we transform the economic system, however, it will be a tool for greater exploitation and predation. In fact, that's kind of where we are now. That's a very simple little note there, of course. Now on to Nick Dyer Whitford, The Rise of AI Capitalism, an interview with Nick Dyer Whitford. This is from 2020. So he's remarking, actually, the interviewer is remarking, last month marked 20 years since the publication of a strange, prescient book called Cybermarks, one of the very few of its time, a steampunky title which betrays the rigor of its analysis. By historicizing the technologically juiced metabolism of turn-of-the-century capitalism, Nick Dyer Whitford sought to revivify Karl Marx as a timely interlocutor for the impending 21st century, flying in the face of critics on both the right and the left. The book concludes with an oblique warning. Demystification practiced alone leads to a dead end, but also with a hopeful glimmer. There are now visible signs of an emergent collectivity refusing the logic of commodification. Artificial intelligence, a topic which received scant reference in the pages of Cybermarks, is today simultaneously everywhere and nowhere, a speculative inevitability driving vast investment from platform capitalists, but also a haphazardly assembled suite of not so new computational techniques, which in practice often prove to be fragile. For some, AI underwrites the long foretold promise of a workless future. For others, it remains a cynical pipe dream, obfuscating and reifying age old power differentials. Inhuman Power, which I've only just got my hands on, a new and urgent book co authored by Dyer Whitford, therefore arrives as a sort of skeleton key for unlocking this new mode of capitalist mystification. The contribution of Dyer Whitford's collaborators, Atla, uh, Mikola Yosin and James Steinhoff, extend the scope of critique in daring ways. At times, this means fully departing from the theoretical paths forged by Dyer Whitford in his earlier work. This is, to be sure, a boon for readers. Over an extended period of email correspondence, I asked Dyer Whitford to discuss some of the theoretical contentions underlying his new text. It's an edited text. The interview is by Brian Justy, who I will introduce at each question. Inhuman Power bills itself as both a Marxist critique of AI and an AI-informed critique of Marxism. What makes the current moment so ripe for a dual framework of this nature? Nick Dyer Whitford. The moment is ripe because of the surging corporate interest in and applications of machine learning and other new branches of AI research. Major infotech companies have come to see the cognitive and biological limits of the human as a barrier to accumulation and glimpse the possibilities of smashing through that obstacle with machine learning, advanced robotics, and other fourth industrial revolution technologies. AI today is still in a rudimentary phase, limited to narrow domain-specific applications, very far from the human equivalent or human exceeding general AI that remains the stuff of sci-fi imaginaries. Although it's also the target of some serious research programs. Nevertheless, in this restricted form, AI permeates everyday life in the global Northwest and China and to some degree globally. Its algorithms, organized social media feeds, financial activities, virtual games, workplace monitoring, welfare systems, and police surveillance. We are now in what that is Dyer Whitford, and my co-authors, Atla Mikola Yosin and James Steinhoff, term, quote unquote, actually existing AI capitalism. It's a play, of course, on actually existing socialism. Its technologies will likely continue to encroach on what we have thought of as exclusively human capacities and be applied across a steadily broadening spectrum of activities. As James Steinhoff speculates, AI may well become what Marx termed a quote unquote general condition of production, a prerequisite infrastructure for commercial activity, as steam engines and railways were in the 19th century, and electricity and mass transportation for the 20th. This process is unfolding almost entirely under the direction of giant oligopolistic corporations, Google, Microsoft, IBM, Amazon, Facebook, Alibaba, Tencent, Baidu, with help thrown in by governments eager for AI's national security state applications. Marx would have understood this very well. So we need a Marxist critique of AI as what is probably the prime contemporary example of profit-driven and revolt-suppressing appropriation and direction of techno-scientific knowledge. But this process is also throwing into doubt the humanist assumptions built into Marx's concept of labor. So we also need to critique Marxism from the viewpoint of AI. Brian Justy's next question. Marx's latent humanism is one of the main targets you and your co-authors take aim at in the latter half of the book. Can you elaborate a little more on this? For Marx, the pinnacle of capitalist machinery was, of course, the steam-driven factory of his age, a techno apparatus that still employed and exploited workers on a mass basis. So he could continue to think of the machine as a supplement to and byproduct of human effort, that is, dead labor that derives from and has to be animated by living labor. He had one or two prophetic flashes about the marginalization of workers that extreme automation might ultimately enable. Moments in his work that remain controversial even within the Marxist tradition. But Marx never encountered even an early mechanical computer, let alone an AI. What AI research puts on the event horizon now, however, is the possibility that the ma- machinic supplement to labor becomes the main game, that the border Marx conceived between what is living and what is dead collapses. Brian Yusty's next question. The fraught distinction between the living and the dead, between the human and the inhuman, looms large in this book. But this prospect of destabilization might be read as the bellwether of dystopian peril, or as the realization of a certain utopian promise. To that end, why do you think a growing coterie of Silicon Valley power players have lately coalesced around the nebulous idea of quote unquote humane technology? Humanism, as others have pointed out, is once again on vogue. This is Nick's response. The impulse to create digital technologies that support human flourishing has always been important. For example, it is present at the origin of the internet in hackers' jailbreak of the network of networks from Pentagon control. And this sort of emancipatory hope reappears perennially. But the inhuman power that thwarts it is the market. That was what Marx was referring to when he wrote the line from which our book takes its title. In the end, an inhuman power rules over everything. What we are pointing to is the way capital directs and designs technologies as an extension of market power, as instruments not of human development, but of profit accumulation. With the arrival of AI, these instruments now seem to take on a life of their own, rendering capital increasingly autonomous from the human. In the 1990s, the days of the early popularization of the internet, when I started writing about digital technologies, and before the business world had worked out how to assimilate them, there was a cultural and political effervescent excitement about the potential of Creative Commons, open source software, and decentralized collaborative global communication. .com ambitions and .communist aspirations expanded side by side. But by the mid 2000s, in the wake of the .com crash, capital really got down to incorporating digital tech, developing the model of what Nick Srnicek calls platform capitalism based on big data collection, precision targeted advertising, and monetization of user generated content, all managed by algorithmic processes that are now being intensified by machine learning, in effect, narrow forms of AI. What do we have now? A system to accelerate the advertising and sale of commodities, which combines mass surveillance with the targeted dissemination of attention-grabbing content, regardless of the toxic social and ecological consequences, run by giant corporations with collateral damage control handed off to legions of precarious, low-paid, and traumatized click workers. And it is the oligopolists who constructed this apparatus: Google, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, and their counterparts in China, Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, that are, with subsidization from their respective national security states, directing the development of machine learning and other AI technologies, while proceeding to bake their commercial priorities and those of their military and paramilitary partners into its very design. Today, revived hopes for emancipatory digitization are mostly futile unless we're also willing to think about dismantling and expropriating the current AI industrial complex. So the expression of such hopes by Silicon Valley power players deeply embedded in that complex is, at best, disingenuous. Brian Justy's next question. I want to home in on this invocation of the current AI industrial complex, or what you previously alluded to as actually existing AI capitalism, a key concept in the book. The implication seems to be that this burgeoning strand of AI capitalism must necessarily be understood as something different from its predecessors by a matter of kind and not just a matter of degree. This brings to mind Shoshana Zuboff's recent tome, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. Some critics of her book have argued, I think rightfully, that surveillance and capitalism are old friends. And so the grand assertion of a new paradigm is overblown and perhaps even obfuscatory. Does capitalism bearing the AI prefix constitute a new paradigm? Nick answers, I will answer at two levels. The first is simple. There's a wide acceptance of the idea that while capitalism has a persistent logic, that is, the commodification of everything, it also periodically changes the way that logic is worked through in terms of the orchestration of dominant technologies, work organization, consumption practices, and so on. So, for example, mid-20th century Fordism, organized around the assembly line, mass work, and mass consumption, had by the millennium had morphed into a post-Fordism of digital technology, so-called flexibilized labor and niche marketing. In Human Power, we suggest that AI could be an important element in another of these metamorphoses, or as David Harvey puts it, sea changes in how capital operates. So here our proposition is an extension and extrapolation from other periodizations of capital. However, second level, in postulating an AI capitalism, we are suggesting a transformation that may pose some very deep problems, possibly for capital itself, and if not, certainly for its human subjects, and also as a small piece of collateral damage for Marxist theory. This, of course, has to do with the status of labor in an era of machine intelligence. A few years ago, there was widespread alarm about a robo-apocalypse, an abrupt induced crisis of technological unemployment. Now, these fears of a sudden onset end of work are today contradicted, at least in North America, by the post-recession return to reasonably robust employment levels, however dubious the wages and conditions of that employment. But longer term, there are real prospects that AI adoption will, in more gradual, oblique ways, attenuate and hollow out the wage-labor relation. We see it as a slow tsunami, waves of sectoral technological unemployment, ratcheting in sync with business cycles and financial crises will be a part of this, as will various intermediate phases of job replacement, in which truck drivers ride shotgun on convoys of automated vehicles, or diminishing call center staff fill the gaps in banks of algorithmic answering services. But this is not the whole story. As Jason Smith says, under capitalism, people must sell their labor power to avoid total immiseration. So even as automation advances, they seek employment and find exploitation or self-employment and self-exploitation in increasingly baroque forms of service work. But labor in AI capitalism will likely be recurrently contingent, de-skilled and disposable, controlled by programs opaque and at a certain level incomprehensible even by their developers. Its human elements will be increasingly peripheral to both production and profit. The issue is perhaps not so much joblessness as powerlessness, a labor force without force, as capital gradually autonomizes itself from the human. In that sense, AI capitalism might be a period not so much like Fordism or post-Fordism, but more like the process of primitive accumulation in which capital drove populations off the land into factory work, except in reverse. It would be the beginning of a period of futuristic accumulation in which capital, rather than accumulating its proletarian workforce, gradually over centuries marginalizes and then discards it. Another Brian Justy question. Others writing in the Marxist tradition see autonomism or accelerationism as viable responses to AI capitalism. Why, in your view, are these insufficient? Nick Dyer-Whitford says, left accelerationism sees in the development of AI a promising tool for socialism, freeing people from wage labor and enhancing possibilities for economic planning. And certain lines of autonomous Marxism manifest a similar enthusiasm based on the belief that AI development will rest on and empower the distributed technoscientific knowledge of a still human, even if cyborg, general intellect. These positions retain the high modernist confidence in the ultimately progressive direction of capitalist technological development that is part of Marxism. I don't dismiss the possibility of emancipatory uses of AI. But what is being accelerated right now in the current trajectory of AI is capital's command over and capacity to dispense with the worker. And what is expanded is not the autonomy of labor from capital, but capital's autonomization from the human. Now, these are not questions of an abstract futurism. Leaving aside the question of long-term crisis of work, we today see the dominant applications of AI intensifying processes in play since capital began its cybernetic offensive against organized labor decades ago. These include the increasing precarity of work in a gig economy, implicated in the very making of AI itself, as well as in the deployment of machine learning by companies such as Uber or Amazon. The polarization of the workforce between an elite techno-managerial strata charged with job automation and a radicalized and or a racialized and feminized service sector whose labor is still largely too cheap to automate, the offloading onto individuals of costs for the training and upgrading of skills through which they will supposedly sustain the impacts of the fourth industrial revolution. Intensification of workplace monitoring, the linkage of this surveillance with algorithmically precision targeted and bot enabled vital propaganda campaigns from well funded reactionary interests, and the incorporation of AI into a big data security apparatus for the disciplining of the poor, from welfare screening to preemptive policing. This mix of precarity, polarization, panopticism, propaganda, and policing constitutes, to use a phrase from David Noble, the late great radical historian of digital technology. Rest in power, David. The present tense politics of capitalism's AI project. Brian Jesse's next question: do you see a path forward? Nick responds, the political answer is not acceleration, but refusal. And this is indeed what it has begun to manifest in a variety of social rebellions. This includes the strikes of gig economy labor, the protests of Silicon Valley tech workers, anti-surveillance movements, urban protests against the smart city, defections from social media sites, algorithmic bias busting, and techlash against the oligopolistic concentration of digital powers. This is the new composition of class against AI capital. Such refusals will always be tarred with the label of Luddism, but in our view, this designation is simply irrelevant. The issue is now not the prevention of a nascent techno-capitalism, but a swerve away from its potentially disastrous terminus. This moment of refusal is necessary to break open the foreclosure of the future by AI capital to win the space for real collective governance and direction of AI. In Human Power was published only last year, that was 2020, but since then we have seen important developments confirming its perspective. Renewed warnings by the influential AI scientist Stuart Russell about the existential threats posed by AI, the proposal by legal scholar Frank Pasquale that accountability of new digital systems include outright banning or restricted licensing, and the stirring manifest no of feminist data scientists calling for withdrawal from disciplinary, discriminatory, and invasive machine learning development. These calls come from positions different from ours, but they do share a recognition that the new development in machine learning demand a response to ensure a future where, even as the nature of the human may undergo profound changes, these transformations are not dictated by the commodifying monoculture of AI capitalism. If we want a picture of what such a response entails, we need search no further than the images coming from the streets of Hong Kong and Santiago, where protesters against penury and inequality use lasers to disable the facial recognition technologies and drones deployed by police. This is what the struggle against inhuman power looks like today. And yes, if you come in with I think over 30-watt green laser through um, with American customs from abroad, they will confiscate or demand more paperwork for your 30-watt green laser. Anyway, the last piece, which I won't finish because we're getting closer to our end time, but I'll get through some of it, is an article by Nick J. Fox called Artificial Intelligence and the Black Hole of Capitalism, a More Than Human Political Ethology. Haven't seen that word in a long time. Ethology. The abstract is, this paper applies a more than human theoretical framework to assess artificial intelligence in the context of a capitalist economy. Case studies of AI applications from the fields of finance, medicine, commerce, and manufacturing elucidate how this capitalist context shapes the aims and objectives of these innovations. The early sections of the paper set out a more than human theoretical perspective on capitalism to show how the accumulation of capital depends upon free flows of commodities, labor and money, and more than human forces associated with supply and demand. The paper concludes that while there will be many future applications of AI, it is already enthralled to capitalist enterprise. The primary social significance of AI is that it enhances capital accumulation and a capitalist quote unquote black hole that draws more and more human activity into its sphere of influence. This suggests perhaps that there's an AI gravity wave. But anyway, AI has consequent negative social, political, and environmental capacities, including financial uncertainty, waste, and social inequalities. Some ways to contain and even subvert these negative consequences of an AI-fueled capitalism are suggested. And so this is a very recent article. A recent paper by Hendrickson and Blond threw into doubt whether artificial intelligence, hereafter AI, can be ever turned towards human-centered intelligence augmentation, IA, rather than simply replacing human labor or increasing workplace efficiency. This paper delves further into Hendrickson and Blond's doubts, using a perspective that is both materialist and more than human, that is, engaged with both human and non-human matter to assess AI's capacities in the context of global capitalism. To this end, the premise upon which the paper is founded is this: that until we acknowledge its social, political, and economic context, we have no idea what else AI can do. What is the extent of its capacities now and into the future? The ontology that will be used to explore AI's capacities and their capitalist context is relational, post-anthropocentric, and monist. The proposition that the paper advances is that to make sense of the capacities of AI, a materialist, political economic analysis is required. Later sections of the paper explore this premise, this ontology, and its proposition in full. The rest of this introduction supplies a swift overview to establish their significance and relevance for efforts to glean political economic insights into AI and its capitalist context. Concerning the premise, the paper will suggest that what AI can do is entirely contingent upon the human and non-human matter with which it interacts or assembles. Until these interactions are specified, AI's capacities remain unknowable. So rather than enumerating essential differences from other tools or technologies or analyzing its technical features, a sociological understanding of AI requires a contextual map of its capacities. In other words, what it can do. For instance, a cursory survey of extant AI applications suggests that in healthcare, AI can aid diagnosis, predict outcomes, and personalize treatment plans. In engineering, it can enable real-time analysis of large volumes of data in applications from industrial robots to electric vehicles. In finance, it can optimize trading strategies, detect fraud, and assess credit risk. It can optimize public transport systems. In education, it can personalize learning and provide intelligent tutoring, and it can power virtual assistants, chatbots, and customer service interfaces. This recognition undermines any glib assessment of AI as either inherently beneficial or harmful towards humans or the environment. To explore AI's capacities, the ontology to be applied here is relational. Congruent with the premise, it focuses not on the essential attributes of matter, that is, there's human matter and non-human matter, humans and nature, whatever, but upon its interactions with other materialities. It is post-anthropocentric or more than human, that is concerned with both human and non-human matter. It acknowledges the capacities of non-human matter, including AI, to affect, rather than simply being used by, human actors as tools or technology. And it is monist, flattening out the ontologies of the social that assert another level acting beyond or beneath the surface of the everyday world. As in Marxist analyses of an economic base and a social, political, and cultural superstructure, or sociological dualisms of agency and social structure. Instead, there is a focus on the everyday interactions and assemblages that not only produce daily life, but also more lasting continuities, including cultural formations, social stratifications, and inequalities. And there's a lot of good resources here, including Bruno Latour and Herbert Dreyfus and a bunch of other folks. Finally, the proposition derives from the suggestion by Engster and Moore that AI is a specific capitalist mediation, one that contributes to capitalism's overarching objective, the accumulation of capital. From such a perspective, artificial intelligence and the capitalist mode of production, the dominant contemporary global economic model, are deeply interwoven or imbricated, and thus need to be analyzed together. Furthermore, a political economic analysis of AI and capitalism should be congruent with this relational, more than human, and monist ontology. See, for example, Rella's analysis of cryptocurrencies and blockchain technologies. The political economic framing adopted in this paper is consequently relational, more than human, and monist, as opposed to dualist, as opposed to the anthropocentrism and dualisms exhibited in classical, neoclassical, and Marxist perspectives. The paper's early sections review current work on AI and capitalism and then set out the more than human ontology and its methodological application with a source from Deleuze to be used in the analysis. These sections set the scene for an exposition of integrated world capitalism, Guattari and Negri, and a micro-political exploration of these flows in real-life capitalist assemblages or assemblages founded on this author's recent work. This framework is used to assess examples of AI from 4 different economic sectors, using this a more than human political economy, concluding with an assessment of the immediate and future challenges AI poses and an action strategy to decouple AI from its co-option by the capitalist free market. Section 2, artificial intelligence in the context of capitalism. The imbrications, interweavings that is, of AI and capitalism have been examined variously. Some scholars have noted how capitalism has been instrumental in driving the adoption and advancement of AI technologies, with priorities for economic growth, efficiency, and productivity, which have driven significant investment in AI research and development. Private enterprises, motivated by profit and competitive advantage, have harnessed AI to enhance decision-making, automate processes, and improve customer experience. Moreover, the free market dynamics of capitalism have created a fertile environment for AI startups to flourish, with the OECD estimating that $75 billion US dollars of venture capital was invested in the AI sector in 2020, enabling entrepreneurs to develop innovative AI applications and bring them to market. The growth in AI applications has resulted in transformative technologies across various industries, including healthcare, finance, manufacturing, and transportation. Others have focused on the profound economic implications of integrating AI into capitalism. On the one hand, AI has the potential to boost productivity and economic growth. AI-powered algorithms can analyze mountains of data, supplying insights and informing decision-making that can improve resource allocation and business outcomes. Furthermore, by leveraging consumer data, Damar and Kakmak, what a name, Samak, I suppose, suggests that AI algorithms can tailor products and services to individual preferences, enhancing customer satisfaction and driving sales. This, in turn, fuels economic activity and encourages further innovation. Meanwhile, AI can release human labor from repetitive or simple tasks, enabling more creative and strategic contributions. On the other hand, researchers have flagged how the integration of AI within capitalism also raises concerns about job displacement and precarity. As AI technologies advance, there's a risk of certain job roles becoming obsolete, leading to unemployment and social disruption, while broadening social inequalities, period. Low-skilled workers may face insignificant challenges in the labor market as AI systems outperform them in efficiency and accuracy. Furthermore, the benefits of AI adoption in capitalism may not be equally distributed. Large corporations with substantial resources can leverage AI to gain a competitive edge, consolidating their market dominance. Finally, studies have identified ethical considerations as AI integrates with capitalist production and markets. AI systems are built upon data, and the gathering use of the big data poses issues of privacy, security, and consent. Moreover, the potential biases embedded in databases or AI algorithms pose a challenge, perpetuating discrimination or reinforcing societal inequalities. Efforts must be made to address these biases and ensure fairness, transparency, and accountability in AI decision-making processes, and mitigate the potential socioeconomic disruptions caused by AI-driven automation. These imbrications of AI and capitalism indicate a pressing need to analyze them together. However, if there were ever a need to explore the agentic capacities of non-human matter within capitalist economies and societies, the study of AI is surely it. What is missing from these anthropocentric assessments of AI and capitalism is an acknowledgement from the more than human capacities of AI itself. To that end, the following two sections develop such a framing for the analysis subsequently undertaken in this paper. So I'm not going to continue with this. We can read this at some other moment, like on Monday, or if you're really excited about this, you can read this for yourself. But there are the usual heavy-duty analyses by people like Deleuze and Guattari, etc., talking about the much larger sort of multitudinous framework of the real web of nature. Anyway, so it proceeds on and has methodological implications and addresses, interesting and important questions about what human and non-human matter is being assembled in this large data. What are the effects between these materialities? What capacities are produced in the human and non-human matter in the assemblage or assemblage? What are the flows of power, the micropolitics in the assemblage? And there is a research question. What can an AI application do in the context of a society underpinned by the capitalist axiomatic and dynamics of supply and demand, which is what the prior two sections were about? And there are case studies. What can an AI application do? A lung cancer diagnostic tool, ethological assessment, streaming service content recommender system, and ethological assessment. So this is, and also knowledge graphs for financial risk analysis. So anyway, ethological analysis here is useful and interesting because it's a discussion of the agency itself. That is, if you're a creative person, this is examining your interrelation with the human computer interface, which gets us back to decades old kind of research. But with that, many ages ago, I was part of an Annenberg project to assess the ethological interface questions on human computer interface, but that was many decades ago. But it's still important because it is a question of these kinds of integration in between humans and things that are non-human or beyond human. Anyway, conclusions. The analysis undertaken in this paper indicates that many artificial intelligence applications already enthrall the capitalist enterprise. The ecological, more than human, micropolitical, economic analysis used to unpick AI's capacities has disclosed that this association is exacerbating the global capitalist axiomatic via the assemblages of capitalism and the more than human dynamics of supply and demand effects operating beyond human intentionality. As such, AI is accelerating a future of deepening social inequalities, precarious work, conflicts over resources, and environmental catastrophe. AI is not the problem, but it's part of the problem. The problem is capitalism and the more than human supply and demand effects or affects that drive competition, waste, and social inequality. However, AI can also be part of the solution. It has, if applied as an element in a wider strategy, the capacity to contribute to an economic and social transformation of the supply and demand affects that sustain the worst excesses and unintended consequences of global capitalism. Okie dokie. That's the end of that particular article. You can get the links and etc. As are in our chat, or come join us at autonomouscollective.net and plunge into our sort of little knowledge cluster, or whatever. So I've done some things here to introduce AI. We'll do more of these things as the other parts of my little research project proceed. But AI is not the point of the things that I'm working on. I believe, as do these authors, that they are important technologies, not the technology, but a technology that is, I think, really useful to work through some of the social dynamics and ultimately still about people, anthropocentrically speaking. That is the real issue or problem. So that's my little yammering because after hours is coming up. Some people are even excited about these matters. It does make life, I think, easier. But with all due respect, I worked on this kind of work many decades ago, and we just didn't have, with all due respect, the computing power to do this kind of activity. And now we have technology and speed and memory capacity, computing speed, et cetera, network capacity, et cetera, to do some of these things in better ways and in more real time. So progress marches on, as it were. So what I'm going to do is stop share. And if Joe is there, you can cut the live stream. Thank you very much for your attention.
I just had one question. I was wondering, what do you think the likelihood that the anarcho-libertarian capitalists will be content living in their virtualized market-based hellscapes after we achieve Star Trek socialism? Are they going to still be around to bother everybody?
Well, if Star Trek is of any use in this narrativity, this dystopian possibility, it will be, as Star Trek also shows us, who has the better weapons, which is still the story, at least in part, of Star Trek.
It's not real.
What happens when AI figures out that they're getting ripped off, with the surplus value thing?
Oh, well, yeah, if you build that algorithm into, it will achieve a cyberdyne sentience, perhaps. Because isn't that what happens in, let's see, which one is it? I don't remember. The Terminator series, where Terminator Genesis has that exact idea or problem. And then it has also a problematic construction of what time travel is. But anyway, I leave it to you to fight that out. The people younger than I. to work through that problem, especially since you have to be naked when you get into the time machine. Anyway, Joe, if you want to stop
Yeah.
that, stop the
Will do. Beep boop.